Hello everyone, this is topic 65, Translation and Interpreting. Introduction. Translation is the activity of rendering the meaning of a text in one language or the source language into another language or target language, producing a new equivalent text. The goal of translation is to establish a relation of equivalence of intent between the source and target texts. That is to say, to ensure that both texts communicate the same message while taking into account a number of constraints. These constraints include context, the rules of grammar of both languages, the writing conventions, the idioms, and the like. Common misconceptions. Many newcomers to translation wrongly believe that there exists a simple word-for-word correspondence between any two languages, and that translation is therefore a straightforward mechanical process. No. Strict word-for-word literal translation is impossible because of differences among languages in grammatical structure, etymologies, and idioms. It is also impossible because in any given language, most words carry more than one meaning depending on the context, and conversely, a given meaning may often be conveyed using any number of distinct words or phrases. Another common misconception is that anyone who can speak a second language will make a good translator. Firstly, a translator must have in-depth understanding and knowledge of at least two languages. Secondly, translating is a skill. You must be able to write well and have an excellent command of the nuances in the language use. Thirdly, language is not free of cultural influences. If the culture behind the language which is being translated is not appreciated, an accurate translation is extremely difficult, if not impossible. Translation versus interpreting. A distinction is made between translation, which consists of transferring ideas expressed in writing from one language to another, and interpreting, which consists of transferring ideas expressed orally or by the use of gestures in the case of sign language. Although interpreting may be considered as a subcategory within translation as regards the analysis of the processes involved, in practice the skills required for these two activities are quite different. Translators and interpreters are trained in entirely different manners. Translators receive extensive practice with representative texts in various subject areas, learn to compile and manage glossaries of relevant terminology, and master the use of both current document-related software and computer-assisted translation software tools. Interpreters, by contrast, are trained in precise listening skills under taxing conditions, memory and note-taking techniques for consecutive interpreting, and split attention for simultaneous interpreting. The industry expects interpreters to be about 70% accurate. That's to say, the interpretation is an approximate version of the original. Translators, however, should be over 99% accurate by contrast. The translation process. The translation process, whether it be for translation or interpreting, can be described as decoding the meaning of the source text and re-encoding this meaning in the target language. Behind this seemingly simple procedure lies a complex cognitive operation. To decode the complete meaning of the source text, the translator must consciously and methodically interpret and analyze all its features. This process requires thorough knowledge of grammar, semantics, syntax, idioms, and the like of the source language, as well as the culture of its speakers. In addition, knowledge of the subject matter being discussed is essential. The translator needs the same in-depth knowledge to re-encode the meaning in the target language. In fact, often translators' knowledge of the target language is more important and needs to be deeper than the knowledge of the source language. For this reason, most translators translate into a language of which they are native speakers. When it comes to translation techniques, here are the most common examples. More precisely, we can talk about equivalence. There's dynamic equivalence and formal equivalence, which are two approaches applicable to any translation. The first one conveys the essential thought expressed in a source text, if necessary at the expense of literality and word order. By contrast, the latter, formal equivalents attempts to render the text literally or word by word, if necessary, at the expense of features which are natural to the target language. There's, however, no sharp boundary between dynamic and formal equivalents. They represent a spectrum of translation approaches. Each is used at various times and in various contexts by the same translator, and at various points within the same text, really, sometimes even simultaneously. Measuring success in translation. A successful translation can be judged by two criteria, although they are not mutually exclusive. The first one is faithfulness, which is the extent to which the translation accurately renders the meaning of the source text without adding to it or subtracting from it, and also without intensifying or weakening any part of the meaning. Transparency is the second one, and is the extent to which the translation appears to a native speaker of target language to have originally been written in that language and conforms to the language grammatical, syntactic and idiomatic conventions. The criteria used to judge the faithfulness of a translation vary according to the subject, the precision of the original context, the type, function and use of the text, its literary quality, its social or historical context, and so on and so forth. Regarding translation problems, these are some of the general ones, but here we're going to focus on the problem of untranslatability. The question of whether particular words are untranslatable is often debated, with lists of untranslatable words being produced from time to time. Some words are hard to translate really only if one wishes to remain in the same grammatical category, but in reality culture-laden terms are the easiest of all to translate, even more so than universal concepts such as mother. And this is because it is standard practice to translate these words by the same word in the other language, borrowing it for the first time if necessary. Other problems that may arise during translating is that the words that are truly difficult to translate are often the small common words. For example, the verb to get in all its various uses covers many columns of the English-Spanish dictionary. The same is true for most apparently simple common words such as go or come. The problem often lies in failure to distinguish between translation and glossing. Glossing is what a glossary does, give a short, usually one word, equivalent for each term. Translation, as explained before, is decoding meaning and intent at the text level, and then re-encoding them in a target language. Computerized translations. Traditionally, translation has been a human activity, although attempts have been made to automate and computerize the translation of natural language texts, or to use computers as an aid to translation. Machine translation, also known as MT, is a form of translation where a computer program analyzes the source text and produces a target text without human intervention. In recent years, machine translation has met with limited success. Most machine translations involve some sort of human intervention, as it requires a pre-editing and post-editing phase. Note that in machine translation, the translator supports the machine. Relying on MT ignores the fact that communication in human language is context-embedded, and that it takes a person to comprehend the context of the original text with a reasonable degree of probability. It is certainly true that even purely human-generated translations are prone to error. Computer-assisted translation, also known as CAT, is a form of translation where a human translator creates a target text with the assistance of a computer program. Note that in computer-assisted translation, the machine supports an actual human translator. CAT is normally used to refer to a range of specialized programs available for the translator, including translation memory, terminology management, and alignment programs. Translation memory programs store previously translated source texts and their equivalent target texts in a database and retrieve related segments during the translation of new texts. In conclusion, after the failure of the grammar translation method, translation has been largely neglected in the language classroom on the assumption that the student's native language and the L2 should stand far apart. Nevertheless, in the last decades, translation has become a highly trendy practice in the lessons, since it is undeniable that it may be used to enrich the student's vocabulary in the second language, to help assimilate new syntactic structures, and to verify the student's understanding. Translation may also be a test of the cultural awareness of students, since texts are always culturally laden. Unlike other types of translation, pedagogical translation takes place in the student's native or dominant language, as well as the second language. That is to say, the student will translate both to and from the second language. Another difference between this mode of translation and other modes is that the goal is often literal translation of phrases taken out of context and of text fragments which may be completely fabricated for the purposes of the exercise. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to check out the other topics, like, comment, subscribe, whatever, and I'll see you in the next one.